Welcome to a moment in history that feels less like a series of political choices and more like a collision with destiny. As we navigate the turbulent waters of January 2026, the air is thick with a tension that transcends borders. We see it on the news tickers, we hear it in the rhetoric coming out of the White House, and we feel it in the tremors shaking the foundations of the Middle East. But tonight, we are looking beyond the headlines. We are looking at the ancient clockwork of the universe, astrology, and the symbolic mirrors of the human psyche, the tarot. For decades, the relationship between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran has been a slow-burning fuse. But in 2026, that fuse has reached the powder keg. Why is this year different? Why is the return of Donald Trump to the global stage coinciding with a celestial alignment that hasn't been seen in centuries? To understand the final scenario, we must first acknowledge that we are no longer in a period of status quo. We are in a period of the great unmaking. In the world of mundane astrology, the study of world events through the stars, nations have birth charts just like people. Iran, born from the 1979 revolution, carries a chart defined by heavy Saturnian influence, order, restriction, and religious dogma. The United States, particularly under the current administration, is undergoing what astrologers call a Pluto return, a time of total structural upheaval and the purging of old shadows. When these two cosmic forces clash, the result is never a compromise. It is a transformation. Look at the sky tonight. As we speak, two of the most influential planets in our solar system, Saturn, the taskmaster, and Neptune, the planet of illusions, are preparing to leave the sign of Pisces. For the last several years, Pisces has represented a fog. It was a time of proxy wars, shadow diplomacy, and strategic patience. But as they move toward the fiery, impulsive sign of Aries in 2026, that fog is lifting. Aries is the sign of the warrior. It is the sign of the first strike. This transition signals that the time for talking is over. Final scenario is no longer a plan on a desk in the Pentagon. It is becoming a physical reality. But it isn't just about the planets. It's about the man at the center of the storm. Donald Trump has always been a disruptor in the truest astrological sense. Born under a total lunar eclipse with a prominent Mars in Leo, his energy is designed to provoke, to challenge, and to dominate. In 2026, his personal transit charts show a direct connection to the midheaven of the Iranian national chart. In plain English, his destiny is pathologically linked to the fate of the Iranian leadership. He sees himself not just as a president, but as the architect of a new Middle Eastern order, a legacy builder who intends to finish what started decades ago. As we dive into this 30-minute investigation, we will reveal the 3 specific death dates for the current Iranian regime. We will lay out the 3 cards of doom that appeared in a recent high-level tarot reading regarding the Strait of Hormuz. And most importantly, we will analyze the Trump Protocol, the secret strategy that combines Starlink satellite technology, internal revolution, and surgical military precision to bring about the final scenario. Is it possible that what we are seeing is the fulfillment of prophecies written long ago? From the centuries-old quatrains of Nostradamus to the modern-day warnings of remote viewers, the year 2026 appears as a crimson stain on the map of time. Some call it the beginning of World War III. Others see it as the birth pains of a liberated Iran. Regardless of the outcome, one thing is certain. The world you woke up to this morning will not be the world you live in by the end of this year. Tonight, we pull back the veil. We look at the cards, we track the planets, we analyze the maneuvers of the 47th president. This is the final scenario. This is the reckoning, and it starts right now. The atmosphere in January 2026 is no longer one of mere diplomatic tension. It has shifted into the realm of an existential ultimatum. To understand the final scenario, we must look at the cold, hard mechanics of power being deployed by the Trump administration. Unlike the shadow wars of the past, the current strategy is being executed with a jarring transparency that has left the international community in a state of shock. Donald Trump has mastered the art of geopolitical gaslighting, using public platforms to signal military intent while simultaneously destabilizing the internal morale of his adversaries. At the heart of this tactical masterclass is the aggressive use of digital communication as a weapon of psychological warfare. Throughout the first weeks of 2026, Trump's Truth Social feed has become the primary source of global anxiety. His messages are not directed at the diplomats in Tehran, but at the Iranian patriots, the millions of young men and women standing in the squares of Isfahan and Shiraz. By publicly stating that help is on the way, the president is doing more than just offering moral support. He is creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the eyes of the Iranian regime, these words are a declaration of an unconventional invasion. From an astrological perspective, this mirrors the energy of Mercury in Aries, fast-cutting and designed to ignite a fire before the opponent even realizes the match has been struck. Simultaneously, the physical chess pieces are moving across the global board with terrifying precision. Reports have surfaced of the United States systematically withdrawing non-essential personnel from the Al Udeid airbase in Qatar. While some analysts initially viewed this as a retreat, the reality is far more calculated. This is the emptying of the nest, a tactical repositioning to clear the path for high-intensity operations without the risk of massive American civilian casualties in the event of a retaliatory strike. The Pentagon's movement of carrier strike groups into the North Arabian Sea, coupled with the deployment of advanced stealth assets to undisclosed locations, suggests that the final scenario is focused on surgical decapitation, rather than a prolonged ground invasion. The Iranian response has been a mixture of defiance and desperation. The sudden closure of Iranian airspace in mid-January was a glaring admission of vulnerability. By grounding commercial flights and activating their aging air defense systems, the Islamic Republic signaled to the world that they believe the first strike is imminent. This is where the physical reality meets the metaphysical. In the tarot, this state of being is represented by the Nine of Swords, a card of nightmares, paranoia, and the paralyzing fear of what comes in the dark. Tehran is currently trapped in a Nine of Swords cycle, watching the skies and waiting for a predator they cannot see. Furthermore, we must address the Musk factor, the integration of Starlink technology into the American grand strategy. For the first time in history, a private satellite constellation is being used to bypass the Iron Curtain of a sovereign nation's internet blackout. By providing the Iranian protesters with uncensored access to the outside world, the Trump administration has effectively stripped the regime of its most potent weapon, the ability to kill in silence. This is the technological manifestation of the Judgment card, the sounding of the trumpet that calls for an awakening. Information is flowing into Iran faster than the censor. This is the technological manifestation of the Judgment card, the sounding of the trumpet that calls for an awakening. Information is flowing into Iran faster than the censors can stop it, and with that information comes the realization that the regime's grip is slipping. Donald Trump's approach in 2026 is a departure from his first term. He is no longer interested in maximum pressure as a means to get Tehran to the negotiating table. The stars suggest he has moved past the negotiation phase and into the conclusion phase. The final scenario is designed to facilitate an internal collapse catalyzed by external pressure. It is a pincer movement of the soul and the machine. On one side, you have the raw solar energy of a president who feels he has a divine mandate to cleanse the region of its old antagonists. On the other side, you have a technological net that is suffocating the regime's ability to govern. In the Pentagon, the strategy is rumored to be titled Operation Midnight Sun. The name itself is an occult reference to light shining in the darkest hour, or perhaps the blinding flash of a weapon that turns night into day. Analysts suggest that the plan involves the targeting of 5 key neural nodes within Iran, centers of command, control, and nuclear development that, if destroyed, would leave the country a headless giant. A The final scenario does not seek to occupy Tehran. It seeks to render the leadership obsolete, leaving a vacuum that the Iranian patriots are expected to fill. As we analyze these moves, we must ask, is Trump acting alone, or is he merely the vessel for a larger cosmic inevitability? The King of Swords energy he is currently emitting is one of absolute clarity. There is no room for nuance, no room for maybe. He has drawn a line in the sand, not with a stick, but with a laser. The harsh reality of 2026 is that the window for a peaceful resolution has likely slammed shut. The momentum of the military machine, combined with the desperate cries of a people who have nothing left to lose, has created a gravity well from which there is no escape. This is the tactical masterclass of the 47th president, a blend of 21st century technology, 20th century military might, and a primal, almost biblical sense of retribution. As the carrier strike groups settle into their positions and the Truth Social posts continue to rattle the windows of the Grand Bazaar, the world waits. We are no longer wondering if the final scenario will begin. We are looking at the clock and wondering when the first spark will turn the Persian Gulf into a sea of fire. Chapter 3. The Celestial Clockwork. The Astrology of the 2026 Collapse. If the military maneuvers discussed in the previous chapter are the hands of the clock, then astrology is the internal gear system that dictates when the chime must ring. To understand why 2026 is the year of the final scenario, we must look at a celestial event so rare and so potent that it has historically heralded the fall of empires and the birth of entirely new world orders. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. On February 20th, 2026, the planet of structure, discipline, and cold reality Saturn will merge with Neptune, the planet of dreams, illusions, and spirituality. This meeting is not occurring in a vacuum. It is taking place at 0 degrees Aries, a point known in mundane astrology as the Aries point or the world axis. This is the 0 hour of the zodiac. It is the degree of pure initiation, the spark of fire that begins a new cycle of human history. When Saturn and Neptune meet here, the boundary between what is real and what is imagined dissolves. Structures that seemed eternal suddenly evaporate like a mist, while visions that seemed impossible begin to take physical form. For the nation of Iran, this transit is a direct hit to its spiritual and political foundation. The 1979 revolution was born under a heavy Neptunian fog, a dream of a religious utopia that has, over 4 decades, hardened into a Saturnian prison of restriction. As these two planets conjoin in 2026, the illusion of the regime's stability is being stripped away. Astrologically, Iran is currently passing through its Pluto opposition, a period of intense crisis where the shadow of the state is forced into the light. This is why the protests are different this time. They are not just about economics, they are a rejection of the very Piscean or religious illusion that has held the country together for 47 years. But we must also look at the man who is acting as the catalyst for this cosmic shift. Donald Trump's 2026 transit chart is one of the most aggressive seen in modern presidential history. In early 2026, Trump's natal Mars, his planet of war and drive, is being triggered by a powerful transit of Jupiter, the planet of expansion and righteous action. This creates a crusader energy. Trump does not see his actions toward Iran as mere policy. He perceives them as a karmic necessity. In his mind, he is the King of Swords we saw in the tarot, the one destined to cut through the Neptunian fog of Middle Eastern diplomacy with the cold steel of Saturnian reality. The timing is eerily precise. In late January 2026, just weeks before the exact conjunction, Neptune definitively enters Aries for the first time in 165 years. The last time this happened was in 1861, the year the American Civil War began. This transit brings a warrior spirit to spirituality. It creates spiritual warriors who are willing to fight and die for a vision of freedom. This is exactly what we are seeing in the streets of Tehran. The Iranian youth are no longer afraid because the astrological veil of fear has been lifted. They are channeling the raw, pioneering energy of Aries, demanding an immediate rebirth. However, there is a darker side to this celestial clockwork. While Neptune represents the dream of freedom, Saturn represents the reckoning. On April 1st, 2026, the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Republic, the Sun and Saturn will form a harsh conjunction in the 8th house of Iran's national chart. The 8th house is the house of death, taxes, and total transformation. This is the death date we mentioned earlier. Astrologically, it signifies a moment where the state's life force is at its lowest ebb. If a first strike or a final scenario were to be executed with the highest chance of success, the stars suggest it would be during this window between February and April. The celestial clockwork also points to a massive Uranian shock in March 2026. Uranus, the planet of sudden revolution and technological breakthroughs, will hit the 27th degree of Taurus, a point associated with financial share markets and national currencies. This explains the economic shock that is currently paralyzing Tehran. The rial is not just losing value, it is being disrupted out of existence by a cosmic force that demands a new system. This is where the Musk factor and Starlink become the earthly tools of a heavenly mandate. Uranus rules technology and satellites. Its influence in 2026 is literally beaming the revolution from the heavens down to the palm of every Iranian's hand. As we move toward the summer of 2026, the energy shifts from dissolution to rebirth. In June, Jupiter will enter Cancer, the sign that rules home, roots, and the ancient soul of a people. For the Iranian people, whose history stretches back thousands of years before the 1979 revolution, this is a Jupiter return. It signifies a return to their true ancestors, their true culture, and their true pride. The stars suggest that while the final scenario involves a painful collapse, it is followed by a surge of optimism and luck. By July 2026, the North Node, the point of destiny, will leave the religious restrictions of Pisces, signaling that the karmic debt of the last 40 years has finally been paid in full. Donald Trump is the hammer of Saturn in this equation. He is the instrument being used to break the old structure so that the Neptunian dream of a new Iran can manifest. But he must be careful. Same stars that grant him the power to disrupt also warn of premature certainty. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction can create a blind spot where a leader believes their own propaganda. If the final scenario is pushed too far, too fast, without regard for the human cost, the judgment card will apply to the victor as much as the vanquished. We are watching a cosmic drama play out on the stage of the Persian Gulf. Planets have set the scene. The actors have taken their places and the curtain has already begun to rise. The final scenario is not a choice, it is a transit. And as the moon moves into alignment for the next eclipse, the chime of the celestial clock is about to be heard across the world. In the quiet, dimly lit rooms where seekers of truth look beyond the physical horizon, the tarot deck has been whispering a consistent, haunting narrative regarding the fate of the Persian Gulf in 2026. While generals look at satellite imagery and politicians look at poll numbers, the tarot reader looks at the archetypal energies that drive human behavior. When we laid out the cards for the final scenario between Donald Trump and the Iranian regime, 3 specific cards emerged with such force that they can only be described as the 3 cards of doom. The first card, sitting at the heart of the spread, is the Tower. In tarot, there is perhaps no card more feared, yet no card more necessary for evolution. The imagery is unmistakable. A lightning bolt from the heavens strikes a crown atop a high stone tower, sending the inhabitants plummeting toward the earth. The tower represents the sudden, violent collapse of a structure built on a false foundation. In the context of 2026, the tower is the Islamic Republic's theocratic architecture. It suggests that the final scenario will not be a slow transition or a series of reformist compromises. Instead, it will be a tower event, a moment of total systemic failure triggered by an external force, the lightning, that leaves the old regime in ruins overnight. The lightning bolt mirrors the Operation Midnight Sun strikes we discussed earlier, swift, overwhelming, and aimed directly at the crown or the leadership. Positioned to the right of the tower, representing the immediate future, is the Five of Swords. This card is often called the Hollow Victory. It depicts a figure standing on a battlefield, clutching three swords while his opponents walk away in defeat and sorrow. This card serves as a grim warning for the Trump administration. It suggests that while the United States may achieve its military objectives and win the battle, the victory may come at a psychological and moral cost that is difficult to bear. The Five of Swords warns of a landscape of resentment. It tells us that even if the tower falls, the king must be careful not to leave behind a world so broken that the victory itself becomes a burden. It is the card of a Pyrrhic victory, where the winner stands alone in a field of debris. Third card of doom, representing the ultimate outcome for the Iranian people, is judgment. This is not judgment in the sense of punishment, but in the sense of a great awakening. The card shows an angel blowing a trumpet, calling souls to rise from their graves. This is the karmic reckoning of 2026. For the Iranian people, it signifies a resurrection of their ancient identity, a call to leave the grave of the last 47 years and step into the light. However, the trumpet is a loud, jarring sound. It signifies that this awakening is forced by crisis. The regime is facing its final judgment, where every action of the past decades is being weighed in the balance of history. At the center of this spiritual drama stands the figure of Donald Trump, who is perfectly embodied in this reading by the King of Swords. The King of Swords sits on a throne decorated with butterflies, symbols of transformation, while holding a double-edged blade. This king does not lead with his heart, he leads with his mind. He is the strategist, the judge, and the executioner of old ideas. In 2026, Trump has fully stepped into this archetype. He is cold, clinical, and intellectually focused on a single goal: the removal of the threat. The King of Swords energy explains his truth social posts. They are swords of words designed to cut through the regime's propaganda. He is not interested in the emotional pleas of the international community. He is focused on the logic of power. Yet there is a shadow to the King of Swords. When reversed or ill-dignified, this king can become a tyrant, someone who uses his intellect to manipulate and his power to oppress. The tarot asks a central question. Will Donald Trump be the just judge who liberates, or the vengeful king who destroys for the sake of his own ego? The butterflies on his throne suggest that transformation is his ultimate destiny. But the sharp blade he holds reminds us that transformation often requires a painful cut. Interestingly, when we ask the cards about the patriots on the street, the Star card appears. This is the card of hope, renewal, and divine guidance. It suggests that while the tower is falling and the King of Swords is striking, there is a genuine, pure spiritual movement occurring within Iran itself. The star indicates that the help on the way Trump promises may not just be military. It may be a cosmic alignment that allows the Iranian soul to finally breathe. The star is the light at the end of the tunnel, but it requires the total darkness of the tower to be seen. The verdict of the tarot for 2026 is one of inevitable rupture. The cards do not show a path back to the way things were. They show a point of no return. The tower has already been struck in the spiritual realm. We are simply waiting for the physical debris to hit the ground. For Donald Trump, the king's fate is tied to his ability to use his sword for justice rather than just destruction. If he succeeds, he becomes the architect of a new era. If he fails, he becomes a figure in the Five of Swords, a victor standing in a wasteland wondering if the cost was worth the crown. As the trumpet of judgment sounds through the digital networks and over the mountains of the Alborz, the final scenario moves from the deck of the reader to the hand of the president. The cards have spoken. The three cards of doom are in play, and the world is about to witness the ultimate tower event of the 21st century. As the dust begins to settle on the hypothetical ruins of the Tower event, by the midpoint of 2026, the world is left to face the most critical question of our era. What comes after the final scenario? History has shown us that winning a war is often simpler than managing the peace that follows. As we look toward the latter half of 2026, the celestial and geopolitical indicators suggest that we are not merely witnessing a change in leadership, but a fundamental pivot in the human story. A transition that could lead to either a catastrophic global escalation or the dawn of a new golden age in the Middle East. From a geopolitical standpoint, the immediate aftermath of a regime collapse in Iran would create a power vacuum of unprecedented proportions. In Washington, Donald Trump would find himself at a crossroads that defines his entire legacy. If the final scenario concludes with the installation of a stable, pro-Western democratic framework, Trump could be remembered as the great liberator of the 21st century. However, the shadow of the Five of Swords, the card of the hollow victory, remains a persistent warning. If the internal revolution in Iran fractures into sectarian violence, or if regional actors like Russia or Turkey attempt to carve out their own spheres of influence from the remains, the peace could quickly dissolve into a localized version of World War III. The astrological transition of July 2026 offers a glimmer of profound hope, as Jupiter, the planet of abundance and expansion, fully establishes itself in the sign of Cancer. There is a cosmic shift toward healing the homeland. Cancer rules the motherland, the family, and the emotional roots of a nation. For the Iranian people, this transit signifies a return to their ancient Persian identity, an identity that predates the 1979 revolution by millennia. This is the period where the star card from our tarot spread begins to shine most brightly. We may see a cultural renaissance in Tehran where art, music, and philosophy, long suppressed by the religious police, erupt back into the public square with a fervor that inspires the world. However, we cannot ignore the global ripple effect. The final scenario is not happening in isolation. By August 2026, the North Node of Destiny will be moving through the final degrees of Pisces, pushing humanity to resolve its collective karmic debts. The collapse of the old order in Iran could trigger a domino effect across the Middle East. We could see the signing of Abraham Accords 2.0, a massive expansion of regional peace treaties that finally integrates a free Iran into a flourishing Middle Eastern economic zone. This is the Golden Age scenario, a vision where the Persian Gulf becomes a hub of green energy, technological innovation, and cultural exchange, fueled by the same Starlink satellites that once brought the regime down. But what of Donald Trump's role in this new world? The stars suggest that by the end of 2026, his work as the King of Swords may be complete. The King of Swords is a figure of war and judgment, but once the judgment is rendered, the sword must be sheathed. There is a risk that the momentum of his victory could lead to overreach. If the final scenario is followed by a demand for total submission from other regional powers, the world may find itself in a state of perpetual friction. The challenge for the 47th president will be to transition from the King of Swords to the King of Pentacles, the builder, the provider, and the stabilizer. By December 2026, as we approach the winter solstice, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will have moved deeper into Aries, solidifying the new reality. The final scenario will no longer be a prediction. It will be a historical fact recorded in textbooks. The three cards of doom will have played their part, and a new spread will be laid out for the year 2027. We anticipate that this new year will focus on the Great Reconstruction. The Iranian people, supported by the global community, will begin the arduous but exhilarating task of rewriting their constitution, rebuilding their economy, and rejoining the family of nations. Ultimately, the Tianduan prophecy of 2026 tells us that we are at a choice point. The planets show us the timing, and the tarot shows us the energy, but human free will determines the outcome. The final scenario is a fire, And fire can either destroy or it can forge something stronger than what existed before. If the patriots on the street and the king in the White House can align their intentions toward a vision of genuine liberty rather than mere revenge, then the year 2026 will not be remembered for the tower that fell, but for the star that rose in its place. As we conclude this 30-minute journey into the heart of the 2026 Iran crisis, we leave you with one final thought. The stars do not compel us, they only impel us. The future is not a fixed destination, but a landscape we are currently painting with our actions, our fears, and our hopes. Whether we face a Kichban Koi Kung, final scenario of destruction, or a Koi Do Moi, new beginning of peace, is a story that is being written right now, in the hearts of millions and in the halls of power. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive investigation. The clock is ticking, the planets are moving, and the cards are on the table. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay hopeful. The dawn is coming, but first we must navigate the night.